Hey everybody, welcome to S.A.L.T on location. We just got a kick out of doing it on the road, and so we thought it'd be fun to keep doing things in places we haven't been before.
Yes, so Brett spent a few minutes after church this morning figuring out where we could go that's close. And so here we are, about 45 minutes away from home, I think.
Relatively close. 45 minutes isn't bad. Yeah. And we are in beautiful somewhere, Texas.
Starts with a W.
Starts with a W.
Weatherford, I think.
Weatherford. Waterford. Whether you like it or not. VeggieTales reference.
Starts with a W.
Starts with a W. I think you are. I think it's Weatherford.
Weatherford, yeah.
Yeah. Waterford is like crystal plates or something. I don't know. Waterford crystal. We don't know that because it's too expensive and we can't afford it. Anyway. So here we are, and we're at one of the parks, and I think sometime later we'll come back and we'll do the Chinese garden. They have a really Chinese garden here. Yeah,
but there was only an hour left till closing, and they were charging $5 a person to get in, so we decided we'd want to go when we
could spend more time for 15 bucks. Yes. So now that Aspen's all grown up, she doesn't get in for free anymore.
Yeah, it's too bad.
It is too bad.
Yes.
When life was good and cheaper anyway. So, anyway, just some fun stuff we saw. Aspen's going to play a video now, and I will try and narrate over it. But as we were driving up, we saw some interesting carpets on sale just by the road. I thought that was pretty interesting. And Aspen's going to try and keep me on track with the video. I guess there were some houses. There was a great big, the courthouse. Are we at the courthouse? Great big courthouse was cool. We'd seen a courthouse in Granbury, but I think this one's actually bigger. When we have more time, we're going to come back and explore more. And after that, we came to a park, and we should see some nature scenes. And we're at the, I don't know, where are we at? Ducks. Oh, and the ducks swimming to us and taking a bath. And we thought that was kind of fun. Ducks are so vain, they're always taking baths. And there was a snake. And no snake yet? We have a snake, and he was very shy. I only got a couple seconds of the snake, and then he withered away. And, The wood things. Oh, yeah, there was a really cool thing over here that looks like a bunch of little stumps bowing down to a great big tree.
It does.
A wooden stone hinge. Wooden hinge, I guess. And there's a big turtle, I think it was a softback turtle. And the snake, the what? Geese. Oh, and finally, beautiful geese swimming away. So anyway, so that was kind of fun. And it is kind of it's a really pretty park here. Because we're on location, we can do live things. I'll show you the park. Here's one of the native indigenous life forms. No, it's kind of cool, so kind of come around. Ooh, the water fountain out in the middle of the pond. It's interesting, they call this a lake. It's Lake Waterford. It's like a pond. Come around. Benches, really nice, fun benches. More native life forms. Yay. And then Miranda. And so, yeah, it's kind of cool. And there's the stone wooden hinge. Ancient trees bowing down to the master one tree. Anyway, back to Aspen. So, fun stuff. It's not Colorado, but, you know.
It's pretty
okay.
here.
It's pretty.
Yeah, and if you didn't see them on the, when Brett was showing you around, there's the prettiest dragonflies around here.
Yeah.
Just flying all around here over the lake.
There's one on Aspen's head right now. No, there's not. Anyway. But, so we told you last time where we were in the middle of nowhere, Texas. We were going to do a little bit more on the topic we'd started back then, which was like crucibles and burning down the house, if you're from the 80s, and how those provide, you know, light and truth and burn things away that we don't need. And now Miranda's going to take it away and give us more deep wisdom insights to guide our lives.
Oh, Brett stretches things a little bit. Yeah, because last week it was so hot outside, we just didn't take enough time to cover everything that we had. So if you were with us last week, I told a story where my oldest son 5 years ago had sent me a text message. No words, just a picture of a house that had burnt down.
Very much like him.
Yes.
Here's a picture. No explanation.
A young man, a few words.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to figure out what this was. Finally I recognized the driveway and the mountains that were behind the place, and it was where he'd actually grown up, where we had lived when he was little.
Kodiak, Alaska.
Yes.
Kodiak Island.
Alaska. So just this last summer, my oldest daughter, Randy, and her partner were taking a trip, and they decided to go back to Alaska. And of course, they went to see where the old house had been. And I would not have recognized it outside of the fact, basically for starters, she took a picture right in front of the street name. So that was helpful. But outside of that, I never recognized it, except for, once again, the mountains in the background and the driveway was still somewhat discernible. Other than that, it was about 1.5 acres of property. It was all covered in grass, a few trees here and there, but the fence was down. And that. So anyways, I
You know what that reminds me of?
What's that?
When we went and saw my old house.
Oh yes, but that was entirely different because they had redone it.
Well, it was interesting. So they didn't burn it down, which, wouldn't have been horrible. But instead of tearing it down, because there's no way you'd recognize the house now, they actually built the shell of a house over it. And so the outside of the house was this facade, but it was actually built over the house. So imagine if you had built, a shell, picked it up, and then placed it on top of a house. That's basically what they did. And the only recognizable part, like for you, was the driveway. For me, it was the mailbox. That was the one thing they didn't change. The mailbox was exactly the same. It was a big brick mailbox. That's probably why they didn't. But yeah, it was all unrecognizable except for the mailbox. I don't know why I said that, but same thing, except it's exactly the same, only different.
Right, so we're telling the same story, but we're going to have somewhat different analogies. So basically, the house was burnt down. We're going to compare that to us. It was gone, but because it was gone, you could actually see the mountains in the back better. And those mountains in the back we're going to compare to God, because He doesn't change ever. He's always there for us. And
see, that's an Old Testament thing. The mountain of God. Moses climbed the mountain of God, Mount Horeb. I mean, sometimes God is, an analogy is drawn in the Old Testament, like the unshakable mountain, the unmovable mountain.
Oh, right, yeah. So God is always there for us. And we can see that, and other people can see that better if we are no longer there in the way. And so basically, there's a piece of property, that's our place that God has put us to live. And so oftentimes we as humans, we like to do and have in order to be, and that's us building up our house.
See, that's really a huge philosophy of life that some people embrace wholeheartedly, and others would say, I don't believe that, but they would live their lives like they do believe that.
Yeah.
Say those three things again. It was
we like to have and do in order to be.
Wait, I thought you said we do to have in order to be.
That too,
yeah.
As well, yeah.
So we do, we work, we perform to have stuff from Stuff Mart so that we can be.
Yeah, be. And so basically, just like we took pictures of the courthouse, and before that there was 4 or 5 of these really beautiful old stone churches. They're the type of place you drive past and you're like, wow, would you look at that? And that's what you see, right, is the house or the building. And so that's what we like as humans. We like to put up our houses, and when people drive by, we want them to turn their heads and go, wow. Would you look at that? And but that is what the crucibles are designed to take down in our lives, so that when people drive by, they aren't seeing us anymore, but they see God. They see who God is.
So like the crucibles we've been talking about, actually if you've been doing any Sabbath school and your Sabbath school follows the quarterly, at least adult quarterly, it's been about crucibles, I don't know, for a while now.
Oh yeah, this was the last week.
The last week for
We'll
it.
start a new one
And
next week.
we got to talking about crucible, and you know, instead of the big crucibles in life, because you think crucible and it's like, oh, major crisis and everything, we were thinking it was more like, you know, it's the little crucibles every day that you go through that really make the difference and the impact and, you know, shape who we are. And those crucibles burn away that stuff like you're talking about, so that we aren't in the way, our stuff isn't in the way, our doing isn't in the way for others to see God. Like your house was gone to see the mountains, although I'm sure it was a very nice house.
Nice enough. Anyway, so as humans, we tend to value pride. But Jesus would not have died on the cross. If he would have had the tiniest amount of pride in him, he wouldn't have died on the cross. There would have been no reason for him to. Everything that he did while he was here on this earth, he did to reveal who the Father was. And Jesus came as an example of how to live in a sinful world. And that was the house being gone.
It's like I live my life to let everyone know what Miranda is like. I talk about green smoothies and healthful living and how she makes us drink garlic, and I do that.
It's because garlic is a great remedy if you start to feel sick. Just takes a large clove of fresh garlic, and get that thing down, and pretty much you're going to feel better most of the time.
Most of the time,
Yeah.
It does work. A couple of times I was getting sick and did the garlic thing. Another diatomaceous earth, which I made fun of and still do just for fun, but diatomaceous earth was the only thing that cured my stomach problems, and
That's
that was
true.
her idea. Diatomaceous earth.
That's true.
Commercials are over now, but yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, we don't sell any products, just
No,
keep that in
we
mind.
make no money
Yeah.
off any of this.
Yep. So, a couple weeks ago when we were at Adventist Risk Management convention, Brett was he did the live streaming course, and he did lights and sound. So all the speakers came to get their microphones from Brett. Well, this one morning, Brett was busy with, nobody can come and get there early for that. Everybody has to get there last minute. And not only are they getting there last minute to get their microphone, they're also handing their slides, PowerPoints and such like that to Brett at the last minute.
Yeah.
So
Here, can you throw this on real quick?
Yeah.
No.
As three
Not
or
real
four,
quick.
As 3 or 4 other people are there doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So a guy walked up to get his microphone, and he was actually the morning devotional speaker. And Brett was busy so Colby was trying to help him, but Colby didn't know that much about microphones either, and I don't even get me close to anything like that. So Brett turns mine on for me every week.
Miranda ran the lights for the whole thing. There was an on and off button.
Yeah,
I would go now, and she'd push.
No, I got to run that because you had to get up to turn it on and off, and so that's why I got relegated to that, because I don't mind the extra.
She likes the exercise,
But anyways.
getting her steps in.
Anyways,
Yes.
so the guy started out with much like everyone else. It was his word. He was nice enough, he really was, but his words were focused, as it usually is in that sort of situation, on himself. Is this thing in the right place? Is it turned down? Where do I clip it on at? And all of a sudden, in the middle of all that, his demeanor just changed. And he said, all of a sudden it was about others. It's like, well, how are you guys doing today? How's it going? You know what? This is going to be fine. If it doesn't work when I get up there, you guys can just come up and turn it on for me. And then he turned and he walked off. And I thought, I could see how he recognized he was feeling frustrated maybe. And while he wasn't really expressing that, he took that moment and opportunity to change and be more outward focused and more like Jesus than he had before.
I missed that. What was I doing?
You were busy with your last minute stuff, trying to
Was
get
I?
this stuff. Yeah, Brett was very focused on what he was doing.
That's interesting, because
Um,
I totally missed that.
So,
I remember him speaking, but I missed the whole interaction.
Yeah, so this guy had morning devotions actually for all 3 days that we were there. And that morning he was talking about building monuments, and he talked about Jacob, who had just stolen his brother's birthright, And now, of course, he had to run away from home because his brother was trying to kill him. And so out there in the middle of nowhere, God gives him this dream and shows him this ladder where the angels are going up and down on it, right? And so when he wakes up in the morning, he builds an altar to God there. And no doubt he tells people about this, right? And eventually, as time passes, other people are going to go by there, and they know that this here was where God showed up. A place where something was built up to point to God and not to self. And so when self gets taken down, others can now see the actions of God, right, rather than ourself. Let's go back to the moment of Jesus there on the cross. Oh, did I not throw that in earlier? Oops.
No.
Well,
Oops.
a little mess up in our notes
Backtrack.
here, but pretend we talked about Jesus on the cross, okay?
Jesus on the cross.
Yeah,
yes.
Jesus on the cross. And what a crucible for the disciples that was, right?
Yeah.
Everything they had believed about Jesus being the Messiah and their hopes that he was going to take an earthly throne and they were going to have earthly riches, glory, and honor, right?
Because it wasn't just too long before this that, James and John were arguing about who's going to be the greatest.
Yeah, all of that at the crucifixion went up in smoke.
Poof.
Just poof. Yes, gone. And
The fire of that crucible burned those preconceived ideas and notions away.
right. And so now, if you were with us last week, you remember that we said that while that is a very hot fire, the crucible is a very hot fire. Within that fire is light, and the light of the truth showing us the truth instead of our preconceived ideas, which are often not the truth.
Not accurate,
Yes.
yes.
And so when Jesus was raised from the dead, now the fire from that crucible, they could see the truth in that. And they were changed from wanting to rule the world to wanting to serve the world. And that is a big change. And granted, this was something that, like in our own lives, it takes time. First of all, we see it in a small way, and then another small way, and another small way, and it all adds up to a bigger picture in the end of our relationship with who God is.
Yeah, it's, even, it's like somebody pointed out Sabbath school today, they're like, well, even after 40 days and then Pentecost, they're it's now time we get, it's one of those things where they knew it was gone, they knew it was down, and there Jesus was again, like, are you going to? And again, Jesus like, no. We've moved beyond that. We're past that now. We're going into what my kingdom really is about, and that's the loving and the serving. And you saw it in their lives more and more.
Yeah.
They became more and more servants of the world and servants of each other and servants of people.
Yeah, and they changed from wanting everyone who drove past their place basically in life to say, wow, what a great house, to instead being a place that that reveals God as the main focal point. And it's the plain simpleness of the grassy field that best reveals the beauty of the mountains behind it, because there is nothing to detract from that. It enhances the beauty of the mountains. So as a side note, these moments are always entirely unplanned by us. In fact, as the speaker told a story that morning about his own monument in his life, it happened to be a church. It's when he was a teenager. His family was pretty nominal Christians, and they went to church most of the time, but not all the time. And so he had a friend of his that said, hey, I was speaking at church on this Saturday night. He says, why don't you come and listen to me? And the guy's like, okay. He happened to live right across from that church, so it wasn't the one that his family went to. So turns out he takes a late nap, and by the time he wakes up, the meeting is well in progress. But he's like, he just felt really like he should go. So he got up and he went on over there. Turns out the meeting, he arrives just as, his friend had finished a long time ago. And the pastor that evening was just making his altar call. And this young man had no plans at all to go forward and commit his life to God in an altar call at all, probably ever in his life, let alone that very night. And yet when he got there, God changed his heart or worked on him somehow. Or they got there, and the pastor was making his altar call, and he went forward. And he said now whenever he drives by that church, he tells his sons, he's like, see, boys, that's the church where God changed Daddy. And like, yeah, Dad, we know. But so to him, that church was a monument, a place of change for him, where God became someone different to him than he had originally thought. And that changed who he is. It changed the course of his life. You know, now probably 20 years later from that, he sees ever so much more of that, because he's in a deeper relationship, and God has shown up in more of these monument type places. But they are never times that we can plan. We don't plan these. God does them, and they show up kind of as surprises for us. That
makes me think of Abraham, and I know I've said this on multiple occasions, but anytime Abraham had an experience with God, and many times it was crucibles, it was, you know, trials and tribulations he went through, but God showed up, he always built an altar of sacrifice, and he left it as he was traveling, because remember, God said, Abraham, get up, go that way, I'll tell you where later. And through his travels, he would build these altars, and the people that, you know, remained, that, you know, had been living there while Abraham and his people were there, and after they moved, you know, the Bible talks about for generations, they would point to that and go, that was an altar built by Abraham, and he was favored of God, and this happened here, and it was an altar of remembrance of what God had done in his life that was a witness to others as well. And that's what going through our crucibles can be, which is what you just said. You know, he pointed at the church, oh, that's where God changed Daddy's life.
Yeah, and basically, you know, we can't plan these things, and yet God shows up to reveal to us who he is in his timing. But, you know, there are times that we try to fit God inside our own little box. I reminded me of a woman at a church we were at once, where Brett was pastoring, and she read this book about how the pastor could bring the whole church to repentance and just have a real revival, you know. And so it had step 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what the pastor needed to be doing. And she pointed this out to Brett. And, you know, it was just one of those things where it felt like she was putting God in the box, that this is how God will work if you do 1, 2, 3, 4 like this, and it's going to work, and you need to do it. So we kind of put God in a box like that in various things in our lives sometimes. Jacob certainly did. Jacob knew of God's plan to give him the birthright. This was something that was known. And so he tried to fit God into his little plan, and it didn't work out so well, not at all. But God, in his great mercy towards sinners, showed up to him in his own perfect timing to reveal who he really was. And he was not a God who needed a man to build his own house with lies and deceit, because that's what Jacob was doing. He gave Jacob a dream that showed him angels ascending and descending from heaven. He showed Jacob that he was not to rely on himself, but to rely on everything that he needed to come from God in the timing and the way that God planned for that to happen.
Yep. I see what you did there. Jacob, and you brought it back around to Jacob. That was really good. Ha-ha.
You know, only at 6 a.m.
Only at 6 a.m. Yeah.
This is why we had our one little note that was off somewhere, because
it was 6 a.m. Yes. I mean, and it's true, you know.
I mean, I had talked about, okay, to be fair, we also did Sabbath school today.
Yeah, we did Sabbath school.
And so those notes had Jesus and the crucifixion first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we thought, oh, we already talked about this. No, wait, that was Sabbath school.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And so, so I guess, you know, crucibles aren't necessarily fun, but they are part of God's way of clearing things out of our lives so we and others can see him better, and shining truth, burning away stuff so we can see the truth about ourselves and life and him. And
right. And like the story that we told last week about the tire, you know, and being flat, and then we nearly could have run into those girls and stuff if we wouldn't have the donut on there.
Yeah.
I mean, what would our life be like without the crucibles? Without those moments where the lies get burnt away and the truth shines forth?
Yeah. It's like that quote from Ellen White. She said, you know, if we could see our lives from beginning to end, we wouldn't change a thing the way God had planned it.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, despite what we go through. All right, so I hope you're enjoying this. We sure are. Kind of our plan is to keep doing this and maybe get out on Sabbath afternoons and go to these state parks. We got a free pass from Southwestern for state parks for a year, so we're trying to take advantage of that.
Yes, and there's actually a lot of small state parks around, relatively
They're
near us.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to keep traveling around to state parks and hopefully bring you along for the ride. So, all right, well, thanks for joining us. Hope you had a great Sabbath day, and we will see you next time at another adventure on the road with SALT.